The BSides DC 2017 videos are brought to you by Threat Quotient, introducing the industry's first threat intelligence platform designed to enable threat operations and management, and Data Tribe, a new kind of startup studio co-building the next generation of commercial cybersecurity, analytics, and big data product companies.
Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Jones. Thank you for coming here and seeing me today. So a little over about a year and a half ago, I started working for a new company, and what we're focused on is security against automation targeting web applications. And this is kind of a new area for me. I've done network forensics, host-based forensics, malware reversing, all sorts of different stuff. But this particular aspect of kind of web development and testing frameworks and things like that, I've never dealt with before. So it's been an interesting learning experience for me to get familiar with different ways that automation can take advantage of web apps on pages. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Just real quick, They Live. Has anybody seen the movie They Live? Do you know what I'm talking about? Right. John Carpenter, love him to death. This is a great film, holds up really well. Made in 1988, basically about aliens have infiltrated society, taken over, and this Joe Schmo, average blue-collar guy, figures this out and goes on a rampage. It's awesome. But the concept of aliens masquerading as humans, I thought was kind of very relevant for the type of automation attacks that I'm looking at and talking about today. So disclaimer, nothing I'm presenting here is world-changing or really that unknown, but don't use it for bad stuff. And the old Google model, don't be evil, that type of thing. And also, I work for a company called Shape Security. This is kind of relevant to what I do, so it's not a vendor demo, but it is, self-aggrandizement for myself. Anyway, what I'm going to be covering today is the attack vector. I'm going to talk about what I mean when I say automation. I'm going to go over some of the tools that are out there that are being used. I'm going to experiment, hopefully some code I wrote will actually work today. And talk about some defensive measures, because that's mostly what we do. We're on the defensive side, but for me at least, I think it always benefits. You got to know how to attack in order to know how to defend. So that's kind of what we're addressing here. So what do I mean when I say automation? Well, let me start off with what I don't mean. And I'm not talking about SQL injection. I'm not talking about cross-site scripting or CSRF or vulnerability scanning. Because frankly, those things, you don't look like a human. If you're inputting, script tags and semicolons and other special characters into, say, a username field, that's not what a normal user does. So we're not talking about that. That's not the automation I care about. The automation I care about is when you go after things like the username and password field, when you're doing real form entry using real standard characters, you're pressing buttons, you're clicking buttons, you're having to worry about defeating IP filtering and getting around WAF style filtering, looking at specific header values, and that's the automation that I'm talking about, and that's the kind of defenses that I typically have to overcome when we go after this type of stuff. And of course, CAPTCHA, that's one of the most common ones we see out there, and I'll talk about ways to get around that a little bit later in the presentation. But yeah, the motivation here is for the consumers getting their video streaming services. It could be hacktivists going after petitions online, or crimeware groups going after banks, going after PII data, stuff like that. It's all relevant, it's all accessible. So the tools, what kind of tools are we talking about here? And there's a lot of them. There's scripts and headless browsers and web drivers and our favorite guy over there on the right. Scripts are great for this type of stuff. They're really fast, they're lightweight. If we're talking about really doing a large scale attack, you can distribute these scripts really easily. Cool.
You're loud. You're loud.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I won't even pitch for that. Turn on in 1 second. Alright, turn on.
Okay, let's see, how do I sound now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'll get the power on. Turn on or again?
Yep. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay, so jumping back just a minute, scripts, they're great, they're easy, they're lightweight. The problem is you don't look like a real user when you're coming using curl to interact with the website. Plus, curl is not going to be able to render JavaScript, and that's a big thing on a lot of modern websites. They have JavaScript components that you can only target if you have a solution automation sophisticated enough for looking for JavaScript tags and elements and things like that. So for certain cases, yeah, perfect. For a lot, not so much. Headless browsers. So this is a browser designed for web testing and development. And it looks like a real browser, it runs like a real browser, it supports JavaScript, but it doesn't have a GUI. It's designed just for testing, basically. And the problem with that is there's some elements that just do not look like a real human interaction. You can look at things like font rendering, screen resolution, other aspects that if you're a advanced defender, you have some good tools, you can pick up that type of stuff, and you can see that it's not somebody real. Again, for most cases, that's probably good enough for you to script automation against a target. But in our case, if we really want to look human, that's not the great solution. Web drivers, and that's what I'm going to be demonstrating today. A tool like Selenium. It's not a malicious tool, it's a testing development tool, again. But it's very sophisticated. It runs a real browser. It drives a real instance of Chrome or Firefox or Edge or whatever. So it gives you a really realistic presence when you're attacking a website, when you're using automation against a website. If you're doing deep pack inspection, if you're looking at user agent strings, it's a real browser. There's no difference at all from a normal user browsing from their machine. So that's the benefit. But it is kind of heavyweight. It requires a lot of libraries, things like that. I'm not saying it's impossible to push out, but that's a consideration maybe. And one other tool I'm going to focus on just for a minute, because it's really widely used out there, is Sentry MBA. And this is just kind of purely an attack tool. There's no good use for this. And it's designed for credential stuffing, to test very, very large sets of username and password combinations to try and break into a website, see what's valid or not. Now, the thing about Sentry MBA is it's actually really simple. It's complex in terms of its capabilities, but in terms of its functionality, it's really simple. It's no better than curl, honestly. However, it has a nice GUI. If you look at this, lots of options in here you can configure, and there's lots of support out there for it. Jumping back, if you go search Sentry MBA on YouTube, there are thousands of videos and tutorials teaching you how to use this, how to get all the information you need to run it. All these kids out there doing this and incriminating themselves really stupidly. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it's all out there. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But basically what you're going to see in these videos is they're all using the same kind of resources. They're going to get configs, which are specific to websites. It tells the tool basically where to post data to, what elements to use, maybe timing and timeout values and retry values, and et cetera, et cetera. So you can either roll your own with that, or you can go download them from a forum like Nold, which you can just find by Google searching. Combo lists, these are the username password combinations, and you can get low fidelity ones by using a tool like Pastebin DB3 or D3V Spider, which is just going out to Pastebin and just scraping any username password combination it sees posted in the last X period of time, last day, last week, whatever. Like I said, low fidelity data. If you go out to some of the underground forums and the Black Hat forums, they have higher fidelity lists that you can purchase from vendors on those sites. So that's another source where a lot of these guys get stuff from. And then lastly, proxies. Gather proxies, when you see used over and over again, it's just grabbing open proxies. You can send your traffic through to mask your source. Pretty typical stuff, so you don't incriminate yourself. So if you think about this, Sentry MBA for these guys is pretty much running from just a single computer instead of distributing the load to a bunch of different assets you control, and you're just masking your targeting using these proxies. Really simple procedure, but really easy for script kiddies. That's what this is, script kiddies. So the action, let's see kind of what we can do. So what I'm going to try and do is play around Twitter. Twitter bots are all the rage these days. Everybody's talking about them. So one great use case for automation is generating brand new accounts. Creating new accounts on a site and then using those accounts to go do stuff with. And it could be in the case what I'm going to do with Twitter, I'm going to go and I'm going to retweet an existing tweet out there. I'm going to add a hashtag to it so I can get something trending potentially. I'm not going to go to that level today, but that's theoretically what you could do. More malicious stuff, you could log into a bank, transfer funds. You could get rewards points on different websites, hotels and airlines, things like that. So there's lots of different things you can do do with automation. The power of using a tool like Selenium, which I'm going to demonstrate here, is that it allows all these follow-up actions. It's not just about getting, you know, a username and a password, testing to see if they work. It's about follow-up interaction after that post-login process has been completed. Just random thoughts here. Selenium is nice for us just because it opens up a real browser. You'll see this, and we can visually verify what's happening. So it's nice for us to test and validate the functionality. Using a proxy, you know, you can easily incorporate that. I do it in a really sloppy way, you'll see, but you know, you can do it much smarter than I can. And like I said, post-authentication actions. Now, Twitter account creation. So I only started playing around with this week because I procrastinate really, really badly. But you know, a couple headaches and roadblocks I ran into on Twitter, screens like this. So phone number validation left. This is one thing Twitter employs when it detects you're coming from, you know, basically an IP space it knows is bad, or it detects obvious signs of automation. So they're not blind to what we're trying to do here. They're not stupid. And they have some tests to figure this out. And so if you get this pop-up during the new account creation, it's really hard to pass in an automated way. There are ways around it, but even then, Twitter is accounting for services where you can create like burner phone numbers and things like that. They know about a lot of those free ones out there. So, you know, that phone number is not going to work in there. Plus, this is an actual voice call, not just an SMS text. So this is actually a really, really good layer of defense here. It's a pain in the butt for, you know, your normal user if he runs into this, but at the same time, for a bad guy like me, you know, that's a good defensive layer. And then on the right side there, you see another message. This will sometimes happen if you get past that first phase and generate an account on Twitter, because you don't have to use a real email address. You don't have to use any real data on there. You can generate just a, you know, garbage Twitter account. But at the same time, if it detects that garbage Twitter account doing automation or unsavory things, it's going to lock it until you validate it with a CAPTCHA or with that voice check right there, or both really. So those are a couple things I ran into. I got it to work once or twice, kept running into this, and it's going to be a project left for the future to really successfully, you know, get this working consistently. However, login was a little bit easier to accomplish. So let's see if I can actually get this working here. So here's my Selenium code. And you can see there's a whole bunch of different libraries I've imported. You can see I've got legacy stuff in here to run Chrome driver, Firefox driver, Safari driver, any browser you want, Selenium can support. And it's easy to go find this stuff, download it, and get it running, at least at a basic fashion. So you can do this on your own in a couple of days, if not 15 minutes. So that's really nice. I've incorporated a proxy here. One thing to note is Firefox seems to be the best to use in terms of a proxy, because you can set these Firefox options, build a profile that references, you know, is built with a proxy address. So, you know, I've done just a one-off right here instead of going through a giant list of thousands of proxies. But at the same time, it seems, at least in my initial kind of interaction with this, Firefox is going to be one of the more commonly used browsers and user agent strings to look for in terms of automation coming at you, because it's more flexible when it comes to integrating with proxies out there. So just kind of something to keep in mind out there. I'm not going to go through all my code here, but you know, one of the nice things with Selenium, and this is the Java version of Selenium, is using XPath to find references. So I don't know if you guys read code, look at source code on websites, but you know, a lot of the time you can't identify dynamic elements using just looking at the source code. So using Chrome developer tools and looking at the, you know, inspect field on there to see where the XPath is super duper helpful when you're putting together something like this. But let's just run it and see if it actually works or not. So I've got 3 accounts here, which I'm going to try to log in with. And I'm going through the proxy right now. Connect to Twitter. I've instrumented some a technique in here to kind of delay typing a little bit. All right, we're coming up there. So it doesn't just blast out a complete you know, string pattern into the username and password field right away. It's going to delay that a little bit to hopefully allow us to look more like a human. Da, da, da. There we go. So you can see I've I've inserted basically a random value between 1 and 300 milliseconds between each character. And I go ahead and log in, and boom, we've logged in, automated, no human interaction at all. And now what's supposed to happen is it's going to bring up a specific tweet that I created. So you could target this using whatever you wanted. Look for a username. You could look for a hashtag, kind of whatever value you want to go to bring up the next step here. Or you can simply start tweeting away. And in the case of a credential stuffing attack, what you're doing is not generating your own accounts. You're taking advantage of tons and tons of different accounts out there and using them to start tweeting and get trending going on. And boom. There's your tweet. There's your retweet with a special hashtag I just created. We can go look for that later. And now it's going through account number 2. So I've got 3 different accounts. Like I said, it would go through, and you can just go through as many of these as possible. Now in this case, I'm only doing this on one computer, but I could easily distribute this out to as many machines as I really wanted to. If I had hosting services, if I'm using AWS, something like that, I can get a whole bunch of machines spun up doing this simultaneously, all going through proxies. So it's flexible in terms of how wide a range you want to use for your targeting out there. And that's kind of the gist of this. So once again, I just want you to see how easy this is. This really did not take me that much time to put together. And I am very much of a novice at actually doing this stuff by hand and coding like this. So me figuring this out in less than a week versus somebody professional, especially a crimeware group that has teams of folks targeted to building this, that's going to be much more effective for them. I'll go ahead and quit out of that. So one other aspect that I really wanted to touch on, and I didn't have time to actually put together code to do it, unfortunately, was CAPTCHA, because we run into this all the time. Of course, this is the automation defense, and it's pretty useless. Now, Google reCAPTCHA version 2, this is one of the best out there, the most commonly used. It's really easy to integrate. It's free. There's really no reason not to use this unless you simply don't want to have CAPTCHA on your site or you have something better. And Proton Mail is what I used to generate my accounts that I was using to attack Twitter, and I thought, hey, that's awesome. Let's generate automatically generate some new mail accounts. And there's much easier targets I could go after for free mail, but in this case, I wanted to try Proton. They actually do stuff really well in terms of design and security on their site. So they do prompt for CAPTCHA here, but what could I do about that? And I found this, as I was Googling this week, and I thought it was kind of funny. So a random guy on Stack Overflow asking, how can I beat CAPTCHA with automation? And just like everybody's a dick on the internet, of course, they all come back and say, oh, you can't do that. CAPTCHA is intended to stop that, blah, blah, blah. Well, for every problem you have out there, there are solutions. So these services, 2CAPTCHA and Death by CAPTCHA, have been around for a while, and they're really, really effective at beating CAPTCHA, regardless of what type of CAPTCHA it is. Whether it's the one with the picture, whether you rotate the picture, you select different squares, whatever type of CAPTCHA it is, it doesn't matter. Basically, there's an API code you can integrate into your tool set and beat any of these. You serve up this CAPTCHA back to this service, and there are humans on the other side. Now, from a moral perspective, what these guys are actually doing is employing sweatshop style labor. So these guys on the other end in places like Vietnam and India, they're getting paid a fraction of a penny to solve a CAPTCHA. And they'll sit there for 15 hours straight solving CAPTCHAs, one right after another, getting paid a pittance for it. At the same time, for me, it's really effective. I got humans solving my CAPTCHA for me, and they feed back that information to me within a matter of seconds. And I can go and I can progress and do whatever nefarious things that I want to. So it solves a problem that I have that may be hard to do programmatically. And you can see here basically how easy it is. So there's a reliable indicator about where you would look for basically the key, the Google key. And it's in the iframe here, it's K equals. You can look for that string, get imported into your code, and then serve it back to CAPTCHA in a request. And then you get a response from this request, and boom, that's your value that you use to serve back to the website and bypass the CAPTCHA. It's just that easy. So you can defeat this. It's not a problem. And there's some other things that I'm looking at doing as I kind of develop this into a more reliable solution. Inserting random mouse movements. Right now I have basically mouse movement incorporated into my code. So it does move the cursor kind of invisibly to us from here to here, but think about a real user. They don't move in a linear pattern from coordinate A to coordinate B. Now there's random swirls, and I click here and there, and I'm ugly about how I interact with the website. It throws off the marketers. But in my case, I really want to emulate that so that it looks more like a real human for anybody that's trying that thing. Phone verification, that was a big pain in my ass. So there are solutions, and this Twilio might be a good option for me. I haven't looked into it with that much depth, but has an API interface I could build up to basically field those phone calls, do maybe a voice to text translate, and get those responses back in real time, integrate that into code, and boom, we're golden. Create more portable code. Like I said, this is running from just my machine right now. I'd like to be able to dump this pretty much anywhere and have it execute reliably. So that might be fun to look into. And lastly, a more reliable proxy network. So I'm using open proxies as I do this testing, and anybody can go find those open proxies, of course. It's an open proxy, it's a free list. So if you have compromised assets, or you have servers and bulletproof hosting facilities, things like that, those are going to be more reliable and more hidden from, the parties that you're trying to target, especially large organizations that have, more sophisticated knowledge and security teams that understand, ASMs that are untrustworthy and things like that. So on the defensive side, what are you doing? What can you do to, basically prevent this type of automation that looks like a real human? And one of the first things is prioritizing your security team, working with your web development team, working with your mobile development team. They've got to be in lockstep. They really do. And I see this over and over and over again on the real world. And in fact, I didn't touch on it today, but the mobile side is one of the most heavily targeted out there because it's just as easy to go after mobile as it is for web, to take advantage of that API interface that they have on the mobile side. And in fact, when you do that, there's usually less defenses on the mobile side than there are on the website. It's easier to incorporate CAPTCHA, and people are more willing to do CAPTCHA on the website than they are on a mobile device. So it's a lighter weight, or it's an easier target. Something to definitely keep in mind. CAPTCHA, yeah, I make fun of it, and it is a joke, but at the same time, it will filter out a lot of the noise that is coming to you, because the bad guys out there that are automating, they're going to use the simplest method possible to start off with. They're going to use curl to hit every single website in existence, and put some CAPTCHA out there. It'll defeat curl from being able to interact with your site, and maybe some other simple tools. So something to keep in mind. JavaScript, it's again, a simple solution, but it will filter out a lot of the noise. It's an easy thing you can implement, and none of these cost anything really. You can do it pretty easily. Requiring a little bit more investment, but highly useful, is enhanced monitoring. So both on your side, standing up big data systems. I was at FSISAC earlier this week, and one of the guys at the banks was talking about what an effective solution he put together by looking at all the data coming in from browsers hitting his website, from his mobile site, integrating that data into upticks and authentication patterns. And he was looking at things like the referrer field on his mobile device. He understood his mobile traffic. He understood that when somebody launches a mobile device, a mobile app to go log in and authenticate, there's no referrer in the HTTP header. But some of this traffic he saw coming in did have a referrer there. So it's some attacker that didn't understand how that app really worked and thought he was doing good by masking his presence by inserting something in the referrer field. So understanding your tools and having the data analytics to actually review them and bubble that up in an effective amount of time so you can actually react to it. Step up authentication. We saw that earlier with the phone verification. There's lots of others asking where you lived 10 years ago and things like that. And those can be effective, but they can also be very irritating for your users. User friction basically is what that's adding. So it's a cost-benefit ratio for you there about what your tolerance is. And then specialized anti-fraud tools out there, like what I do. So these all exist, and they're out there, and you can take advantage of them. It all depends on what your risk level is, and how badly you want to fight this type of threat. So wrapping it up, what I want you to take away from this on the attacking side. There's lots of ways to do this automation. There's lots of tools out there that support all sorts of languages that you want to use. It's all capable. In Selenium, I was using Java, but there's Python Selenium, C# Selenium, Ruby. Whatever you want to use, it's out there. And don't think that dynamic code or polymorphic content is going to prevent anybody from targeting your website or your web applications, because I can find that stuff just as easily by using Selenium and rendering the page and interacting with it. CAPTCHA is a joke. monitor these login failures. This is a big thing. You know, you have an internet-facing application, you're going to see login failures with it. You just accept that. We all know this. But you got to keep an eye on them. You know, is it normal that you have an uptick in 90% login failures on your website for every 100,000 accounts that do succeed? Understand your behavior and what's common for your platform. And lastly, to track your user post-login. This is one of the biggest things I could say. If you have the capability to use something like T-Leaf or other tools to look at what users are doing after they log in, this is going to be a differentiator. Because the attackers, especially those guys using Sentry MBA, all they're doing is trying to see if an account is valid or not. They don't do anything after. They don't follow up. And in fact, most attack campaigns do that as well. There's a stage 1 reconnaissance where they investigate your site, a stage 2 where they test out credentials, and then a stage 3 that could be a month later where they actually come in and interact with those accounts and do things. So if you can start flagging them early on by users logging in and not doing anything, that's going to save you so much time and potentially money. And I mentioned that earlier, checking the referrer field. Little things like that are unique to your traffic, your mobile app, your website, things like that. If you understand that, you can get ahead of the attackers and them not understanding how your website works. And that's about it. I appreciate your time. There's some resources down here. If you can read, this kind of small. Selenium HQ, Guru 99. That was a lifesaver. This guy has walkthroughs step by step on how to install and get the stuff running. And it's a great, fantastic resource. jQuery UI is a lot of testing, interaction stuff you can do to play and make sure that your code is working as you expect it to. And just to throw out to this guy, I don't even know who he is, but he had CAPTCHA on his page for testing, so it was nice. And again, thanks for John Carpenter and some other sources to support this presentation. Any questions? Yeah?
Can you go over the defensive aspects again?
Yeah, absolutely. So, let me jump back a couple steps here. So you've got kind of free steps you could take as well as tools that you can purchase and implement. And some of the simple things are CAPTCHA, even though I make fun of it, filters out the noise, as well as enforcing JavaScript. That's a really simple thing you can do. Enforce JavaScript before they're allowed to log on or interact with your website. That's going to filter out a lot of that noise, a lot of that simple automation that's not going to be able to render the JavaScript and interact with it. So step number 1, do that because it doesn't cost you anything. Once you've done some of those simple steps, taking advantage of free, time and investment you can do, start looking at things like data analytics. Because if you start getting more data about how your applications work and basically the responses you get from your users, and you bubble them up to an interface that you can look at easily. And I'm not just talking about a SIM, an ArcSight or a Splunk or whatever, because all data is dumped into there. I mean, something a little bit more effective where it's pulling out stuff specific to your web application that looks anomalous. That's going to be a manpower investment on your side. It's going to be a tools investment, but at the same time, it can be really effective in reducing the time to respond when you see someone attacking your site, especially when you see someone getting through successfully. And if you tie this back, this enhanced monitoring, to that use case I was talking about earlier, we're looking for users who log in and don't do anything afterwards. That's going to allow you to respond and flag accounts really, really quick when they're being targeted. And then you can respond to that and start either shutting them down directly, forcing password resets, or handing them off to your fraud department to follow up with later. And then other tools, step-up authentication. Everybody's kind of looking at this these days. There's different kinds of step-up auth, but honestly, for most of the executives I talk to on a regular basis, they want to avoid that type of stuff at all costs because it adds so much user friction to the experience of somebody, your average consumer, logging in. And two-factor is the same thing, multi-factor auth here. If they don't have to use multi-factor, if they can figure out a way around that and still have security, that's what they want to do. And they'll pay lots of money to find a solution that does that. That answer your question? Oh. Yes?
If creating accounts is so easy to automate, why haven't we seen reports on new web services where people can't create accounts because of automation? People who are generating as many user accounts where there's no accounts existing.
So yeah, the question was, why haven't we seen basically account exhaustion on sites if it's so easy to generate random accounts? People are more interested on targeting basically login than they are account creation for most cases. If you're going to target account creation, you have to figure out basically is there value behind that. And then some of those account creation, that's usually where you see CAPTCHA. Let me bring up a funny website real quick if this loads for me. It's called Phantom Buster. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but this is a new company that's basically, they're selling this as a business, this automation, this scraping. If you look at their pricing here, they talk about how many pages you want to scrape a month, you know, do you require CAPTCHA to be solved, all this stuff. So in terms of facilitating this account creation, this automation, there's companies out here doing this for you. So if you don't have the skill or the interest in doing it yourself, you can outsource. So yeah, it exists, and it's a constantly improving barrier, both on the defensive side as well as on the attacking side. The attackers are always one step ahead, of course. So, you know, if you start off, you know, from scratch, like kind of I did this week in developing code, you're going to run into a lot of barriers, and that describes, you know, 99% of the folks that are trying to use automation to do bad stuff like this. So it takes them a while or more dedication to figure out how to get past some of those basic defenses like step-up authentication. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
When you were using Selenium, how did you account for like page load delay? I've used it a couple times, and it's always like script works up until a random network fluctuation or something.
Right. So there's a couple ways to do that. There's good ways and there's bad ways. The bad way, if I scroll down here, is to use thread sleep.
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. So using Selenium, one of the problems you run into, and you kind of saw it when I was using the proxy today, the page was loading really, really slowly, right? So if you're writing script, how do you account for basically those delays you might run into when you're using random proxies out there that are gonna just not respond very quickly? And there's a couple different methods in Selenium and Java to do that. One is thread.sleep, which is just a specific, you will sleep for this many milliseconds. This is a bad way to do it, right? For us, it's not as bad because we're not doing development and testing. You know, in those cases, you want stuff to run as fast as possible. For us, we want to insert specific delays, purposeful delays in interacting with the site so it looks more like a real human. So this is not bad, but in the case like you're talking about with dealing with latency, it's not an ideal scenario. So there's other solutions in here. They have explicit and implicit wait times built in. And if you go to that Guru 99 site I mentioned earlier, it details all of this stuff out there. But this is the line that you're interested in. Wait until expected conditions. In this case, it's the visibility of an element. So wait for a visible element to load on the site before I do any interaction with it. You can also wait for an element to be clickable, you know, like a button, before I interact with it. And there's a whole bunch of different options here, whether they're hidden values, hidden visual elements, or you know they're supposed to be rendered. So yeah, there's lots of ways. Just Guru 99 and implicit and explicit waits. Any other questions? Well, great. I appreciate your time. I hope this was interesting for you. And like I said, my name is Andrew Jones. And if you ever need me, my contact info here, ajones85@gmail.com. Thank you very much.